Okay, we're here today to talk about your life as a child.
Mm-hmm.
Now, originally you were born Audrey Canning,
Mm-hmm.
and then you married and you became Audrey Shell.
Yeah.
Now, what about your brothers and sisters? How many were there of you?
There were 3 sisters and 3 brothers, but the one, Olive, died in 1936, so I was 4. I can just remember her funeral. It was horse-drawn carriage,
Right.
and Mum's brother, Uncle Charlie, lifted me up to see her in the coffin. That's
right.
all I can
So they had an
remember.
open coffin at the funeral?
In the front room of the house in Ely.
Right. Oh, so they kept the body in the front room?
Oh yes, everyone did them days,
right.
yeah.
Right.
So I can remember his wife, she had arthritis, Auntie Madge, in a wheelchair, saying to Mum, "Don't cry, doll, she's with God now, or Jesus now." Because Mum must have been crying, but I can't remember any more about the funeral at all.
Hmm.
All I know is, that was
Yeah.
all I can remember.
So, which can you remember which house you were born in?
Well, I
'Cause
think I was born.
the problem was, of course, is your mother and father moved around so much, didn't
Yes, yes.
It's,
I think I was born in Clarence Embankment
they? Right.
in down the docks. But I don't really know properly.
Right. So they actually
I'll
lived
have to
in
ask
2
Edward.
houses in Clarence Embankment, 76.
Oh, I don't know nothing about the numbers.
And then they moved to the corner house. This is according to Edna.
Edna, yes.
And you moved actually to the corner house, which was a much bigger house.
Mm-hmm.
You don't remember that at all, do you?
No, nothing about it at
right.
all. I've heard in the family that I know Eileen was born down there because I've heard in the family she was named after a young girl that helped to look after Mum in bed.
Oh, right.
So that's how I know about Eileen being there.
Yeah.
But I really don't know
No.
anymore.
So why was your mother in bed?
Well, we're having the baby.
Oh, right.
Those days they
Oh,
stayed in
right.
bed at least
helped
a fortnight.
they helped as a midwife or post?
No, I think looking after the other children and that. No, the midwife used to come in
Right.
those days.
Right.
But she looked after the other helped, and with, I suppose, with the washing and cooking. I don't really know much about it that way, but I know Eileen was named after her.
Yeah. So which was the first house you remember?
Ely,
In Ely?
yes, Phyllis Crescent in Ely,
Oh, right. So
where Olive died.
Right.
Then we moved from there to a house in Clive Road in Canton, very temporary. I didn't know, I can just remember sleeping in the back bedroom with Eileen. That's all I can remember about that house. I know we were only there a matter of weeks.
Right. Right.
And then we moved
and
to
you would have
Seven
been
Grove.
4 or 5 then, I suppose.
Oh, Mum moved from Ely. Well, I was only just 4 when Olive died, and Mum moved from Ely because she
Oh.
couldn't stay there after
Yeah.
losing Olive. So I was still about 4, I think. And then we went to Seven Grove, and I know now that Mum bought the property. Mum and Dad bought it, but I didn't know
No.
any of that. I was too young to know things like that.
Yeah.
But and I started school they used to start at 5 those days, and I started school from Seven Grove, and I went to Seven Road School, infants first,
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah.
and when I went from the infants up to the big girls, as we used to call it those days, Mum bragged and told everybody that I was so clever that I didn't go to Standard 1, I went to straight to Standard 2.
Oh, right.
And
Was that the case?
so, yes, it
Oh, right.
was, yes. To an old bitch called Miss Thomas.
Well, she's
when I
probably not
say-
with us now.
She certainly wasn't.
So the first school you were at, do you remember much about that? Did you say you were 5 when you went there, was it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Then I can remember Howard going to school then.
Right. Because he would have been much older than you,
And-
wouldn't he?
Howard younger than me.
Oh, sorry, yes, of course,
yes. I can remember Howard going, and I
Right.
can remember sort of being in charge of him and walking with my arm around him,
Oh,
looking
right.
after him,
You were
going
in
to
charge of
school.
him.
I was in charge. And there was a teacher that was nasty to Howard, and I can remember Mum going up to school
Yeah.
and saying she'd already lost one child
Yeah.
and she don't lose another through,
Mm.
you know, because this other teacher apparently was nasty to Olive before she died, you know, long before she died.
Right.
The teacher was in Herbert Thompson School in Ely, was nasty to Olive.
Oh,
So Mum would not have anyone nasty to us,
I can
you
imagine.
know, exactly. So she went up and sorted her out and told her, because this teacher used to poke like this, and she had long nails, and she poked Howard. So
made-
Mum
made
said
him cry, no
she'd
doubt.
poke her back if she ever poked him again.
But she did never poke you.
I can remember the head teacher's name was Mrs. Edwards, and she was an absolute darling.
Oh, right.
She was lovely,
Yeah.
short, stout lady. She was gorgeous.
It's funny because most children don't look at headmistresses or
Oh,
headmasters and
everybody
think of them
loved
as
Mrs.
nice. You know,
Edwards. Yes.
Oh, right. And you
Yes.
actually thought she was nice.
And she had a money box, like the head of a black man, and he had a hand like this, and you could put a penny in it and he'd eat it, you know. And she
Oh,
used to, if we could put a penny or a halfpenny in Sam, she loved it, and I think she must have sort of bought Christmas things or something with it. I don't really know,
No.
you know, but she was an absolute darling.
Yeah. Oh,
And
that's
I can
nice.
remember my teacher's name was Miss Oram when I left in the top class in the infants. I left the infant school to go up to the girls' school.
So that early school, is it co-ed? Is it
Oh, no, girls and boys not
it's
mixed.
separate,
Oh,
right?
God, yeah. You weren't
Ah.
allowed to look at the boys, never mind. Gosh. And we had, of course, lessons were different then. We had to learn Welsh.
Oh, yeah.
Our Welsh teacher was Miss Pike,
Mm.
and she might as well carried a spike with her because she was so stern. But for all that, there was good discipline there, you know, absolute discipline.
Do you remember those times as happy times in that school?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You obviously got on with the teachers.
Yes,
and
yes.
You didn't have any teachers poking
Well,
you.
not wanting to brag, but I wasn't in the bottom lot of the class. So, of course, the teachers could be very nasty to people. I can remember a few girls couldn't read and even speak the words. Probably they were dyslexic. Nowadays,
Yeah.
they realise,
It
but
would have been spotted. and-
not realised those days. And I can remember we went to meet Miss Thomas, then Miss Merritt was a law unto herself. I was petrified of her. Miss Locke and Miss Rogan was the teacher from when I left there, because when I was in Miss Locke's class. Those days you had to sit a scholarship to go into high school, and I sat the scholarship and never did my homework. I was very, very lax, and I failed, and it broke my heart.
Oh, dear.
So Mum said to me, you had a second chance to take it again. So Mum said to me, you can take it again, but I'll never ask you once if you've done your homework. It's up to you. If you want to fail, you fail.
Mm.
And I did my homework properly the next year, and I won the scholarship and went to Canton High School
Right.
from there.
Yeah. In that, in the first school you were in then, how far away was that from your house, from your home?
I suppose, well, it was in Severn Road, and there was Severn Road, then Severn Grove, and we
Right.
lived in the Grove. So I suppose it might have been like half a mile,
Mm.
looking
So-
at it these days.
So at that age, would you have gone on your own?
Oh yes,
Mhm.
yes.
And
In
everybody
fact,
did then, I
as
suppose.
you went from Severn Grove, you had to cross the road.
Right.
There was a crossroads there that went to King's Road and Romilly Crescent,
Yes. Yeah.
and I've forgotten the name of the other crescent there.
Mm.
But
It's quite a busy junction.
we
isn't it?
had to go across Romilly Road, but there wasn't
Mm.
much traffic.
No.
And of
No.
course, during this time, the war had come, so there was a shortage of petrol, so
Mm.
there wasn't much traffic about anyway.
You could probably walk all the way down the
Yes,
road to school
yes.
in the middle of the road.
It was buses, really, you had to watch, you know.
Oh, right. Yeah.
But
And I suppose everybody did walk. So would you have gone? Would you have met a friend on the way?
yes, my friend across the road was Valerie Briggs
Yeah.
and Audrey Quested. Between the three of us, there was only 3 months difference,
Mm.
and we used to sort of either they'd knock our door or I'd knock theirs. It's
Mm.
Valerie come to school, you know, and
Right.
we'd sort of all be ready together, you know,
Yeah.
and we'd walk up together.
You'd all go together
Yeah.
as friends. And would it be 9 o'clock you starting then?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Oh, and it was perjury to be late. You would, if you were late, you were kept outside until assembly, because those days they had assembly every day,
Mm.
and you were kept outside, and then all the late girls were marched in at the end of assembly,
Mm.
put into shame. So
Mm.
I'd rather die than be late. I'd rather not go to school than be late. And most kids were the same, you know.
Yeah,
We had
right.
regular latecomers that didn't care, like, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
When I look back, you know,
Yeah.
they'd go in, you know. But I can remember the war starting when I was in the girls' school in Severn Road.
That was the first school you were in.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what I remember about it was there were barrage balloons up in the air. Now, I didn't know nothing about the war or anything. Mum was very cautious. She never told us anything
Mm.
that was happening bad, only good.
I thought there wouldn't have been the news coverage and stuff like
Oh
that.
no,
then, was there?
no.
So
Well, there was
it'd
the
be
news
easier.
was on the radio,
Mm.
and we were sent out of the room when the news came on.
Mm.
Because I can remember they would say, "This is the BBC. This is Raymond Glendenning reporting,"
Yeah.
and then out, so that you wouldn't hear anything bad.
Yeah.
And it was the same. We used to have the Echo every night,
Oh right.
and we weren't allowed to look at the Echo.
Mm.
Because, of course, it was Allied troops doing this, so, you know, and every day on the front of the Echo there was always a map and showing where the troops are and where the Germans are, and we weren't allowed to look at that, you know.
Mm.
But I can remember the war starting and seeing these barrage balloons. And there was a girl a few doors up which I was forbidden to play with because the family were filthy. Shall I say her name?
Yeah.
Peggy Uphill. And it was a shame, really. She was a nice girl, and but for all that, it was very, very, they were filthy. So I wasn't allowed to play with her. And she said to me, my mother said, they're going to come down and bomb us, these barrage balloons, and I was petrified of them. So I can remember coming home, running. Mum was out the garden with Dad doing something, and I ran out and I said, quick, come in, quick, them things up there are going to bomb us and kill us. And Mum said, no, you know, there's nothing like that.
Yes,
you know.
it's funny what you think as a child,
Yes,
isn't it? You know?
yes, because I mean, we'd never seen anything. And they were quite prominent, all these barrage
They're very
balloons, you
large,
know.
aren't they?
And of course I know now that they were there to trap planes, but I mean, we didn't know at the time what it was all about, you know, never having seen one, you know. And they were always silver.
Oh,
Always silver, plain
Yeah.
silver, no colours at all on them.
Yeah.
Not like you see advert ones now, you know, there was
No.
always plain silver.
plain silver.
And so as the time went on, I realised there was a war then, you know. Then we started to have air raids.
Mm.
In between this, every house was given an Anderson shelter, which is corrugated iron that looked like that with a frontage to it, as you can imagine. Dad built it way, way, way away from the house. We had a very long garden and he built ours. You had to dig a hole and put the shelter in and then fill the top with earth.
Yes, on top.
And Dad used to have marrows growing all over the top. He never wasted anything.
Use every bit of space.
Oh, yes. And when marrows weren't in season, I can remember it being full of beautiful orange nasturtiums all over it. It was an absolute sight when you think back on it, you know.
Wow.
And we went, the air raids started to come, which meant we had to carry gas masks, and you weren't allowed to go to school without your gas mask. I can remember once I forgot it and I had to write it out 50 times.
Oh, you
I
had
will not
lines.
forget my gas mask.
Yeah.
And I can remember queuing for the gas masks in St David's Hospital with Edna and Mam, and there was no one else there, so I don't know. I suppose Mam got them for Howard and Eileen. I don't really remember that bit, you know. But I can remember queuing in St David's, and we queued a long, long time in the foreground of St David's Hospital for these gas masks.
So was there ever a time when you had to wear them?
No.
No.
We used to, the only time we ever wore them was practice in school.
Right. There was
The
never any gas
Teacher would
warnings.
come and ring the bell to say, you know, I'm going to ring the bell, and when I do, see how quickly you can get your gas masks on, you know. So this was the only time we ever wore them, you know, to practice. We never had to wear them because,
Yeah.
well, there was never any gas dropped anyway, you know.
They're quite claustrophobic, though,
Oh,
aren't they?
yes,
You know?
yes.
Were there people that didn't want to wear them?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I would think people with asthma and that. But as a child, I didn't find it claustrophobic. It was a novelty.
Yeah.
And later on, why, I don't know, but there must have been another sort of gas danger, another type of gas.
Oh, right.
Because everyone had to go and queue up again. And there was a sort of a green sieve thing strapped to the end of the gas. The gas mask came out like this,
Right.
you know, and it was black and silver. And then it was like a green colour thing put on the end of it. So that must have been for a different sort of gas. But I didn't take any notice of it. I was
No.
too young to.
Yeah.
Just took it all in my stride,
just,
really.
Just
you
go
know.
along with what your parents say, I suppose.
Whatever, yeah.
Yeah. That sounds good.
Got blue movies going on here.
Let just stop that. There we are.
I'll turn my lin on you, or Carol.
Oh, even worse. Okay, after that short interlude, where were we? I think we were talking about. I think it was your first school. We were talking about the. You were
Oh, I
saying.
was saying about the gas masks. We had to get the extra bit on there, didn't we?
Oh, well, that's right. Yeah,
yes.
but you never actually wore it.
No.
Thank goodness.
No.
So during an air raid, then where would you go?
Oh, they were in the school playground. There were shelters,
Oh, right.
and it was well rehearsed
Yeah.
to run, you know, you had to file it properly. There was no pushing and shoving.
Right.
It was well rehearsed.
So were they overground or underground? Those shelters.
They were just out in the playground. They were
Yeah.
only brick
Oh right.
buildings, really, you know, when I
Right.
look back. And they
Right.
were pitch black in them. I hated them.
Oh,
But,
right. So it's better to be in that, of course, than have the
well,
school
away
come
from
down.
the school building.
come
So
down
this
on
was
you,
the
yeah.
thing, you know, it was as
But-
far...
But like an Anderson shelter, it wouldn't protect you
Oh,
from a
no,
direct hit. or
no, if
anything.
it had been a direct
Yeah.
hit, no. Of course, the schools those days had bigger playgrounds than they got now.
Mm.
You know, it was a big
Yeah.
playground, you know. At least as a child, I thought it was a big playground, you know.
Mm.
It was long to me. You know.
You obviously rehearsed it, but I presume that you didn't go in there very often because there weren't many raids in the day.
Oh, yes, we went in. Oh, yes, there were raids in the
Okay.
day as well.
Oh,
yes, yes.
Yeah.
And we were also taught that if you were out in the street and you knew if an aeroplane was up above you, I mean, as children, we didn't know if it was a Spitfire fighting the bomber or what, but we
Mm.
knew it, you know, the big bombers had a dull, as they went along, you know, you could
Mm.
hear them quite different really to a lighter aircraft. And we were taught to lay on the ground and pretend to be dead. Lay face down and pretend to be dead if there was an aeroplane, because it had been known that they'd gone over places like this and machine gunned,
Oh right.
where
People
there
in the
were
street.
crowds, you know,
Right.
perhaps children or people in factories from work. They had to run as
Mm.
well, you know, everybody,
Mm.
you know, not only schools, factories everywhere had
Yeah.
to run from the building.
Did you take that in your stride?
Yes,
It
yes.
didn't affect you in any way.
No,
The thought that you
to
have
me
to lay
it was,
down and-
well, and all the other children really, it was like, oh, get out of lessons.
yeah, anything. You would be shot at by the Germans to get out of lessons.
But now when we had air raids during the night,
Mm.
I used to be very frightened.
Mm.
Howard wasn't frightened.
Mhm.
We had a big house, and we had a cellar down in the house which Dad had whitewashed right through and put benches down there and that, you know, and blankets,
Mm.
and older ones like George, and we had relations living with us that had been bombed out as well, and
Oh,
they'd the younger ones like George's age would sleep down in the cellar.
Mm.
It sounds awful, a cellar, but it was really
Yeah.
well done, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But when an air raid would come, Dad always carried me down to the air raid shelter down the end of the garden, because I was frightened. He used to cover my head right over, always
Oh,
put his
right.
coat around me and cover me right over because I was so frightened of it.
Mm.
And of course, as children, your mother or father's coming in the bedroom, you're dead asleep. It could be 1, 2, well, even 12 o'clock at night was late, you know, for us.
Yeah.
And to wake us up, come on, quick, there's an air raid. And we'd have to, you know, get out of bed, didn't know what day it was, or, you know, you're all dazed and run like mad down to the shelter, you know.
Mm.
So I used to be very frightened.
So you had a basement you
Yes,
could go in,
yes.
or the Anderson shelter.
Yes.
And
But, well, mostly because it was such a big house, we used to go down the Anderson shelter.
right.
But, like I say, I don't really know what it was all about, but George and them would sleep.
Mm.
Or not so much George, but because he worked on the tugs, he was away a lot anyway. But we had other members of Dad's family, Dad's sister and her children. I'm
was
talking
that?
about
Who's-
children.
who's-
Auntie Lizzie,
Oh right, yes.
Dad's older sister. And when I'm saying children, they were men in their 50s.
Oh,
You know,
right.
because Auntie Lizzie was old as well.
Mm.
Well, I don't know if Ivor would be 50, perhaps 40, but he was very old
Mm.
looking to me, you know.
Oh, yeah.
And they would sleep down in the cellar for convenience, I suppose, you know, and
Yeah.
also because the house was absolutely packed, because Mum had so many people living there because of they'd been bombed out somewhere else,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
That and
Yeah.
of course there used to be people coming around that would billeting officers they were called, and if you had an empty room in your house you had no choice.
Oh, right.
Oh yes, we got
Be
somebody
allocated
coming
to
here,
somebody.
you know, and in they come.
Oh.
Oh yes, you had no
Wow.
choice.
So it'd be better to have someone that you knew
The family,
come
yes,
in and the
yes.
family rather than have a stranger.
Yes.
It's been freezing cold in the Anderson shelter in the winter,
Oh,
though.
it was freezing and damp,
Yes, of course.
terribly damp.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. And
Yeah.
and
Because a
lighting?
lot of the time Eileen wasn't there because she was in the hospital in Dulwich House, because she was in hospital such a long time on and off, you know.
Mm.
But I can remember the first, not bombs, but blitz we had with fire, you know.
Oh, right, yes.
And it was always known as the January Blitz. January, freezing cold. And Dad was carrying me down to the shelter, and of course there were flares dropping. They dropped flares to see what was underneath, because everything was blacked out. So if they dropped flares, that gave the pilots a
Yeah.
view of what was about, you see.
Yeah.
And it was a built-up area and that, you know. And I can remember trying to struggle because I thought it was fireworks and I wanted to see the fireworks. And Dad was struggling
Fireworks.
carrying me,
Yeah.
thinking it was,
Yeah.
because I thought it was fireworks.
What about lighting in the shelter then?
Oh,
The
Dad
Anderson-
had a lamp, an oil lamp.
Oh, it's an oil lamp.
That was his
Right.
god. Nobody could touch Dad's oil lamp.
Oh, right.
He
Yeah.
used to clean the glass regularly, a few times
Mm.
a week. And we used to get paraffin down the shop in Gertie's down by Landerfields.
Yeah.
We'd go for a gallon of paraffin. It was a paraffin lamp. What they call them, a storm lamp. Isn't it?
Yeah.
And it was quite a big one.
Who would go for the paraffin?
And, me or Howard.
Yeah. Oh,
Yes,
right.
yeah.
So not your father then. You or Howard.
Well, sometimes Dad would go, but,
Yeah.
you know, it was mostly us kids would go
Right.
for paraffin, yeah.
Yeah.
Go to Gertie's, go and get a gallon of paraffin.
Mm.
And you'd think nothing of it, you'd go, you know.
Mm.
And it wasn't dangerous. We wouldn't sort of think we'd do something bad with it like kids would these days. You wouldn't trust kids with paraffin these days. But we just bring it home, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, right. And
Think
you-
nothing of it.
you-
But,
I suppose that'll last you quite a while. Gallon of paraffin in a storm lamp.
well,
like
I
that.
don't really know.
No.
You know,
Yeah.
time wasn't anything to us as children like
No.
that, you know. The days went by and somebody else could have got a gallon in between for all I know. Perhaps
Mm.
Dad went down on
Yeah.
his bike and got it. I don't know, you know. It just
I suppose that would be a little bit of heating.
because
Not much. though.
it wasn't for heating, it was
No.
for light.
Yeah.
There was no heating, you know, just blankets around, you know.
Yeah.
But I can vividly remember shaking with fright going
Mm.
down the shelter in the night.
Yeah.
And Dad always, if Dad was alive today, he'd tell you how frightened I was, you know.
Mm.
But I didn't, it didn't do me any harm.
You lived to tell the
Lived to
tale.
tell the tale, yeah.
You would have had counselling now, of course. So on.
Oh yes,